This is Nathan Morley. I have the book in hand. I will be giving a copy away, so stay tuned for that. Now, Nathan's out in Cyprus at the moment, but I caught up with him there, and he chatted about why he wanted to write the book, The Naafi Story, The Canteen Army.
Well, it's a subject that has never been covered in any detail. So even though it has a long and interesting history, nobody's ever put pen to paper and recorded it from the start until today. So I'm a curious person because I'm a reporter by trade. I'm a journalist, and I was doing something or other to do with Naafi, and I remember hitting a dead end thinking, hang on, there's not much here to work with, and one story led to another, bits of scraps of information, and suddenly a really interesting story started to come together. And here we are with a history of an organization a century old, which has been in every military campaign and every posting in the world from Lincolnshire right the way through to Hong Kong. It's quite a tale, I think. They are the service to the services. They provide little home comforts in their shops and their canteens. They try to make sure that everything the soldier would get at home, they get wherever they're posted to. And, of course, that depends on the postings, like Germany, for example. When we had a huge military presence there for the past 50 years, they had huge department stores, pretty much like Tesco or Asda, which had every British product under the sun, from HP sauce to Walker's crisps. Everything was there. And then out in Afghanistan and Iraq, they would have all the kiosk-type shops, little places where the troops could go in and get pretty much the same thing.
And if we look at that sort of golden era, if you like, of Naafi, I mean, it's remarkable. You imagine people serving in a small shop or canteen, but these people were working under fire, shell fire, rocket attacks, air raids as well. I mean, this was dangerous stuff for them to be doing.
Oh, yeah, it was incredibly dangerous, and they have some pretty remarkable campaign medals. I mean, for one example I can give you is the story of a boy called Tommy Brown, who was serving on a Navy ship in the Naafi canteen, and they were in combat with a submarine. The submarine came to the surface, they'd hit it, and the Germans were jumping out. He jumped in, the Naafi boy, and managed to get the codes to the Enigma machine, which actually changed the entire war, because suddenly the British intelligence could read German secret codes. That was a Naafi boy who did it. They were in Crete, picking up their machine guns alongside their customers, fighting German paratroopers. They've really had quite an exciting history.
And the geography as well that they would be working in. I mean, not just the risk of attack, but also the fact that they were trying to run these operations in deserts in North Africa or freezing wastelands in Iceland. I mean, those conditions would have been really challenging as well, wouldn't they?
Oh, yeah, I think during the war, certainly Africa and the Middle East, it wasn't just awful being out there. In the book, I have the diary of a Naafi girl who is never published before, a woman who was working at the Naafi from 39 to 45 in Egypt. The biggest problems, of course, was not just the heat. These are days before air conditioners. It was heat, also food storage, food supplies, because so many ships bringing materials in from the UK and food supplies from the UK were being sunk by German submarines. And, of course, there was the actual war itself going on all around them. So they're trying to run this great retail operation in these conditions. It was a pretty tough call. They were in Tobruk and North Africa, and the tales. There's quite a lot on that, actually, because the more I dug into the Africa campaign and the Second World War, the more stories were emerging, and it just, it could have been a book in itself, just that period, the exploits of the canteen boys.
And they would run pubs as well. Is that a pub as we would imagine, or how did that work?
No, it's exactly, except that the furniture, they could be built, the pubs could be built in the hulks of old aeroplanes with a tent. They were put together with bits of wood, which they had scavenged. The glasses were made from melted down bottles. It was all pretty thrown together, but they had pubs running all along the Mediterranean coast. And they were called roadhouses. And this is pretty much where the British troops on their on their journeys to and from Egypt into Libya and along that Mediterranean coast. They'll stop in one of these roadhouses every couple of 100 miles and get a pint and a pie.
And I've got to ask as well about the entertainment branch as well. Much ribbed, you've described it, but when you look at the stars that featured, including Gracie Fields, Arthur Askey, George Formby, these were pretty good shindigs they were putting on.
Oh yeah, I think Ensa was underneath Naafi ran Ensa, and by 1930, the end of 1939, they were running more shows than the BBC. Actually, they were enormous. The scope of their program. And everybody who's anybody went through there. The Goons, most of the Carry On team, Tommy Cooper, they all started with Ensa, got their first taste of show business. And I think without Ensa, it would have been a very different 50s, 60s, and 70s, and the way entertainment went in the United Kingdom. So, I mean, Peter Sellers said he wouldn't have ever got anywhere without the Naafi, as indeed did Tommy Cooper. So we have them to thank for that.
Well, it's interesting as well. I wondered whether you've spoken to relatives or descendants of people that served in the Naafi, because I suppose their role was just as important, really, as any other. But perhaps they don't get the recognition that some do.
Spot on, exactly. And I think a lot of Naafi people feel that. And the ones that have seen the book so far and bought it have said, thank goodness. There we are, They're talking about us in Tobruk, and they're talking about us in the liberation of Europe and D-Day, where they were there at D-Day and they were there at Dunkirk. And finally, they're getting a mention. And I think the people I've spoken to, and some people are interviewed in the book, the eldest being a 94-year-old Naafi canteen worker, and there are relatives of those who served in Korea and the Second World War, and testimony from our archive testimony as well. And I think a lot of them were concerned that their part in many campaigns had never been acknowledged, and hopefully that's been righted a little bit here.
Nathan Morley there talking to me from Cyprus about his new book, The Naafi Story, Canteen Army. There is a quote from Lord Heseltine on the front of the book. It reads, "Wherever our armed forces go, Naafi is never far behind. They are there when it matters." A really interesting book full of different stories from the people who worked as part of the Naafi. And if you would like it in your stocking, or if you would like to give it to a relative as a Christmas gift,